Ying had just finished showering and was sitting on the bed when she heard a knock at the door. Assuming it was her boyfriend returning, she hurried to open it, only to find a stranger instead. Ying immediately tried to shut the door. The man forced his way in. He tossed some cash onto the table and began behaving inappropriately, proceeding to undress. Mistaking Ying for a sex worker, he attempted to initiate physical contact with her. Downstairs, Mark sensed something was wrong from the window and rushed upstairs to rescue his girlfriend. He swiftly covered the man's head with a tablecloth and proceeded to beat him mercilessly, while yelling at Ying to escape. The man was pinned to the ground by Mark, who then flipped the table and made his getaway. The couple went to the police station to report the incident, but Mark, fearing for Ying's safety, pulled a police officer aside to speak privately. However, to their dismay, the officer responsible for taking Ying's statement turned out to be corrupt and took advantage of the situation to remove Ying's clothes. When asked about the assailant's facial features, Mark, consumed by his desire to save Ying, had failed to notice anything except for a pentagram tattoo on the man's right hand. Unbeknownst to Mark, the assailant was none other than the head of the police station, who now stood outside the interrogation room, watching Ying through the one-way glass. When colleagues approached to inquire, he falsely implicated Mark as a thief who, in cahoots with Ying, had attacked him. With a lecherous grin, he and another corrupt officer entered the interrogation room, leaving no doubt as to Ying's fate. Meanwhile, Mark, feeling scrutinized, noticed a group photo of the police officers, including the tattooed man. Realizing they were all colluding, Mark seized the opportunity and rushed into the interrogation room, only to witness a scene he dreaded. Before he could react, he was overwhelmed by the officers and subjected to a brutal beating and suspension in midair. Upon receiving a call from another sex worker, the police learned that Ying was not involved in any illicit activities. However, their immediate reaction was not contrition but rather a scramble to cover up the scandal. They fabricated evidence to frame Mark for theft and assaulting an officer, resulting in a 6-month sentence. They also threatened Ying to keep quiet. Mark's fingers continuously rubbed against the bedpost, wearing them down until all 10 were painfully smoothed. He awaited the day of his release, determined to seek revenge for both himself and his girlfriend. On the day of his release, Ying, his girlfriend, waited eagerly at the door. Though relieved to see her, Mark's heart sank at the sight of her heavily pregnant belly. They exchanged no words as they left hand in hand. They lived a peaceful and happy life together for a while. However, the police discovered multiple cases of pregnant women being murdered by cesarean section, and suddenly, Mark's shadow loomed behind them. He held a shard of ceramic against their throats, and as they fell to the ground, Xiaomai tightly strangled them, rendering their struggles futile. Not long after, the police retrieved a plastic bag containing an undeveloped fetus along with the officer's identification. Another senior officer also met his demise. Mark carved open his wife's belly, leaving him trembling in fear on the ground. Removed the phone he had been planning to use to call for help and scalded him to death with boiling water. Mark attempted to escape by bus, but he was spotted by pursuing officers and forced to flee into a nearby field. However, he was eventually apprehended. Due to the lack of fingerprints, the police had no evidence to convict him, so they resorted to torturing him for a confession. They tried every torture method imaginable, but Mark remained unyielding, refusing to admit guilt. He taunted the officers, knowing this wasn't his first false accusation, and he had nothing to fear. This infuriated the police, who unleashed a frenzy of violent beatings upon him. Ying learned of the series of abdominal mutilation cases from the news and realized it was her boyfriend seeking revenge. To end this tragedy, she decided to take action. Holding a knife, she walked into the bathroom and cut open her own belly, removing the fetus. After completing the deed, she discarded the knife down the drain. She had burned their only photo together before entering the bathroom and then dialed the emergency number. Ying was originally a student at a nearby school, relying on her grandmother. Although she lacked intelligence, she was kind and innocent at heart. Mark, who sold buns by the school, fell for this girl at first sight. After Ying's grandmother passed away, she was forcibly sent to a nursing home. When Mark found out, he sneaked into the hospital and rescued her. Ying returned home only to find the door sealed. The kind neighbor took them in for the night. However, after the neighbor left, the police came and mistreated Ying, mistaking her for a sex worker. Upon his release, he sought revenge against the police officers involved. But there was still one final matter left unresolved. It's the head of the tattooed police officers, who retired and became the director of a welfare home, appearing kind and compassionate every day. Mark found him, and the man calmly invited him for coffee, preemptively stating that he had forgiven Mark and wouldn't pursue the past anymore. Mark couldn't accept this, so he pulled out a gun, shot the tattoos on the man's hand to pieces, then aimed at his body and fired 2 more shots. At this time, a group of children came in and saw this scene. One of the little boys attacked him from behind and inserted a pencil into his neck. The other children also swarmed up to avenge the director. Finally, a child pointed a gun at him, and with a few gunshots, Mark fell to the ground and died in a pool of blood.